Russian lawmakers have ratified a defense treaty with North Korea, which pledges mutual assistance if either country comes under attack. Russia's lower house of parliament, the Duma, voted unanimously to approve the pact. The upper house is expected to do the same. The United States says Pyongyang has sent thousands of troops to Russia for training. South Korea has condemned the deployment as a security threat. Let's get more on this from journalist Fabian Kretschmer in Seoul and DW correspondent Nick Connolly in Kyiv. Fabian, let's start with you. South Korea has been urging for an immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops from Russia, citing its own security concerns. But North Korea has been aiding Russia with weapons since the beginning of the war. Why do South Koreans seem to be more worried now?
Well, to be very clear, South Korea has already been worried before. I would say their voices have not been heard so prominently. But now what we're seeing, that North Korea has sent soldiers to Russia, that is a further step of escalation. That's even, more grave. And what is South Korea worried about? I mean, they are questioning what does North Korea get in return for its military cooperation with Russia. And the closer they collaborate, the higher the price will be. We already know that Russia is supplying North Korea with a security guarantee. I mean, Putin and Kim Jong-un, they both signed a military treaty that is almost an alliance. Then we know that Russia will probably give oil supply to North Korea, will give hard currencies to North Korea. But of course, Russia could also supply North Korea with military technology. And then if North Korea now sends parts of its special troops to Russia and potentially fighting in Ukraine, they will get experience on the battlefield. And that is very concerning, of course, for South Korea, because North Korea is openly saying it is preparing for a conflict also with the South. So it is really a very tense situation.
Nick, over to you. What would a potential deployment of North Korean troops in Ukraine mean for the situation on the front line? Would it make a difference?
Look, I think from a Ukrainian point of view, the missiles and the ammunition that North Korea has already sent Russia is a very big deal. Some people are saying potentially even more important than boots on the ground. By some estimates, up to half of the shells used by Russia come from North Korea. So there is a huge supply of weapons going there. But certainly we are seeing that Russia is running out of soldiers, that it is having more trouble recruiting people, having to pay bigger premiums to get people to sign up, and even having to consider calling people up in Russia rather than just getting volunteers on board. So certainly that would be a help. As for them being here in Ukraine, obviously that would be the most kind of favourable situation for the Kremlin. But even if they stay on Russian territory, say, and help Russia to protect its borders from Ukraine, were deployed, say, to the Kursk region where Ukraine is active, has occupied some Russian territory, that would already take the pressure off the Russian army and allow the Russian army to push forward faster and along a wider stretch of the front lines than they currently are.
Now, Fabian, South Korean officials are saying they could potentially review sending weapons to Kyiv. What more do we know?
Yeah, so both President Yoon Suk-yeol as well as Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol, they both said all options are on the table, and those options include explicitly also possibly sending weapons to Ukraine. Now, what they said is that the concrete measures and the steps that South Korea will take, they have not been decided yet, and they depend on how North Korea and Russia will behave further. So I would see it as some kind of leveraging tactical patience. So, for example, if North Korea continues and will deploy their soldiers also to Ukraine, and when they really show up in large numbers and fight on the battlefield, then I'm sure that South Korea will also consider taking the step and send weapons to Ukraine. And I think South Korea is really also worried that the whole power balance here in East Asia is shifting. What we see again here is basically the region falling into two blocks: the authoritarian regimes of Pyongyang, Beijing, and Moscow getting closer, and of course South Korea and Japan, they get closer to NATO.
Nick, how important could potential South Korean weapons deliveries for Ukraine be?
This is a really big deal. South Korea is one of the few countries that still has a big weapons production base, is still preparing to fight the kind of artillery war that NATO was preparing for in the 1980s, but in the meantime has basically taken its attention away from and is now slowly having to kind of painstakingly recreate that production capacity. We've seen Ukraine's neighbours, Romania, Poland, buying a lot of weapons from South Korea. And unlike the US or Germany, say, where production lines have to be basically recreated from scratch, South Korea is able to, deliver these weapons in spaces of months rather than years, and it has very big stockpiles of ammunition. So far it has supplied the US a bit, and then the US was able to send its own shells to Ukraine, but also if those came direct to Ukraine, that would be a huge help. So there is great hope here in Ukraine that this might change, and that actually this is the one Western allied country that is able to actually kind of put, make a difference on the front lines and actually come good on these promises in a short space of time. So in a way, there is a kind of real sense that this is maybe a mistake that the Russians are doing, that it actually could have impacts on the battlefield here and really see Ukraine getting the support it needs much further and kind of much faster than Western European countries are able to do.
Journalist Fabian Kretschmer in Seoul and DW correspondent Nick Connolly in Kyiv there. Thank you both very much. Now let's bring in journalist Jeongmin Kim. She's the lead correspondent at NK News and editorial director at Korea Pro based in Seoul. Jeongmin, South Korea has been urging an immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops from Russia, citing its own security concerns. But North Korea has been aiding Russia with weapons since the beginning of the war. Why do South Koreans seem to be more worried now?
It seems that it's because there are various potential rewards that Russia can get North Korea, such as military cooperation further. First of all, Russia could help North Korea with satellite launches, which failed many times, and reconnaissance, more reconnaissance over South Korea could be considered a direct threat for Seoul. And News recently found that North Korean soldiers were looking at certain satellite imagery commercial that appeared to be classified South Korean command. So something like that could be considered more threat for South Korea. And they could also help North Korea with engines for missiles and space launch vehicles and modernize their older arsenal, and also further embolden North Korea by stabilizing its domestic situation, aiding economically. And less likely, but North Korea could learn better about real-life modern warfare, which could directly influence South Korea's tactic and the posture to a certain extent.
Now, are there any indications that the cooperation between Russia and North Korea could lead to a serious escalation between South and North Korea?
Well, I personally think that there wouldn't be a direct escalation due to the deployment. Of course, there are a lot of weapons that North Korea has been saying they can direct at South Korea, and they have been defining South Korea as a separate state and an enemy rather than the compatriot. And they have been showing a lot of symbolic moves. The tension has been already quite high, but as much as North Korea is getting more paying more attention to the Ukraine situation with their soldiers there, I don't think they will have much appetite to fight both fronts, especially when their assets and soldiers are there. But there is a possibility that it might escalate at the Ukrainian battlefield, because South Korea is reportedly sending a monitoring team to Ukraine to study the tactics of North Korean soldiers and potentially maybe interrogate North Korean soldiers or potential defectors as well. And with these sort of hypothetical situations, there might be some escalation of tension there.
Now, South Korea said it would consider sending weapons to Kyiv in response. Do you think that would further provoke North Koreans?
Well, first, I think it will be less of a provocation to North Koreans, but more to Russia. In the start of the year, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol initially wanted to improve trade relations with Russia. South Korea is a very export-oriented country, but that weren't happening since the North Korea-Russia treaty. And South Korea has been saying that it will be providing weapons to Ukraine if Russia crosses certain red line, which they kept very vague. But now they are making it into offensive and defensive weapons to provide to Kyiv potentially. So depending on how much they think that Russia crossed that red line, they will be providing step-by-step sort of deal for Ukraine. And for North Korea, would this be a provocation? Maybe if the South Korean weapons directly influence the North Korean soldiers, but not as much as directly compared to the Russia situation.
The journalist Jeongmin Kim in Seoul there. Thank you very much.